Hello, everyone. I kind of wanted to come in guns blazing because our topic is presence and getting triggered, and I just thought it would be really cool, but no. And we don't even have Danielle with us today. She lives on a ranch with horses and has guns. That would have been really cool. But welcome, everybody, to the Presence Posse, as we are. And we are presenting, as mentioned, presence and getting triggered. And today we are Jan Hart, Bobby Cobb, and Miriam Siegel. So how about if we dive right into it? Getting triggered, what does that mean? For those of you who may not know, and actually those of you who are watching already, you're more than welcome to put your 2 cents in. What does it mean, getting triggered?
Yeah.
I know nothing about it. Of course, I've never been.
Of course you haven't.
I just lead this thing.
Well, I can speak from experience. I've been triggered lots. Yeah. I guess it can mean different things to different people, but in my experience, it's a term people use quite a lot these days. You know, a person triggers me, a situation triggers me, an environment triggers me, and it's an interesting concept. But to me, it means that somebody is having a reaction to something or someone that's not positive, and that they're uncomfortable, or they might feel they've gone into fight or flight in some way. So in general terms, that's what being triggered means. It's something happens or somebody says something, and we have a reaction. And I mean, the reaction or the trigger, being triggered, can come from so many different places. It can be a trauma, it can be a past experience, it can be an association we've created in our mind. I mean, there's endless ways it can be created. And I suppose what we're going to explore is how to navigate it when it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And can we repurpose it? I hope we, at some point along the way, get to the point. If you think, I think the way that the word is used today and the way that it's really been used traditionally, it indicates like a sense of feeling out of control. And I know one of my big personal triggers that was with me for a long, long time and still sometimes rears its ugly head happens when I'm dealing with 1-800 numbers for customer service or IT or any of those things where, there's just so many things that can go wrong that for me, that would trigger me. And my own definition of that back then was I was just losing control, like circumstances were becoming overwhelming, and it was almost like I could feel that I was about to lose my shit, and or did, in many cases.
Me too.
If I were it, I could spend the rest of my life apologizing for all of the innocent customer service people who have received just a flood of negativity from me once I was triggered. And today it seems like we are using it more and more. People talk about trigger warnings and in the US we need safe spaces if there's going to be a speaker with an opposing view on campus. And it almost today seems like it's being used that it's anything that keeps me from feeling perfectly blissful, and it's some outside circumstance that I can point to and blame. You really triggered me by not, whatever the offense may have been.
I love that, Bobby, and I love what you said when you started speaking about how you used to see it, because one of the things that's changed for me and in recent times is that if I do feel myself being triggered now, I view it as material for transformation for me. It's something for me to look at about myself, and to get into a reflective mode or just be with it or understand it and work through it that way. Whereas before it would have been that person, that situation, and the focus was very much on managing what was outside of me.
Yeah.
And really what I've come to learn and what's been really helpful is that anytime I feel triggered, it's to look inside or look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Is the most helpful thing to do.
I think, Jan, you have stumbled on like the perfect definition of trigger, how it was used back when we didn't use it quite frequently and how it is used today.
Yeah.
It's like we are attempting to control our environment. So there's nothing around us that's going to be able to get into this secure bubble that we've created. And we begin to see that something will happen that keeps us from being able to control what's happening out there. And I think it's once you have realized that there's more to this game of life than just what we've been conditioned to believe, it becomes an invitation to go within and see what's going on. And anybody who is a regular listener of this podcast has probably heard me talk about triggers or our emotions being rumble strips on the highway of life. And triggers to me now are those rumble strips, but they're like the extreme warning that, like when I'm losing it, all of a sudden it's like, okay, where's my confusion? What do I think should be going on here? And let's take a moment to recalibrate what really is going on here and see if these emotions are. I think that it has to do with an emotion that we feel is inappropriate, and often that was caused by a perceived external event that fired us off.
Yeah.
But looking back at like my IT conversations or customer service conversations, even in the stage where that trigger was very raw, very near the surface, and it was easily stepped on, there were times that I would have like really pleasant calls. And if I got somebody who seemed to be empathetic in the way that I thought that they should be, if they were following, my definition of what a good customer service person is, I had wonderful conversations with those people and wonderful experiences. And I would get off the phone and I would just be like, God, if everybody could just be like that, the world would be such a better place.
People would just behave the way we need them to.
Yeah.
To keep us happy.
It would be so easy. Life would be
I
so
love how we're
good.
all laughing at that. It is so typical that if everybody would just be the way I want them to be, then I would be fine. And it's nobody figuring out it's me all the time. It's not them. And just coming to that realization that, okay, I'm the one going into my shame. I'm the one who's feeling small. I'm the one who's feeling entitled. I'm the one who's feeling rejected. I'm the one who's feeling out of control. All of these things, because I'm creating it in my own head and my own reality. And it's like, I can actually change that, which means I can actually empower myself so that I don't have to feel like that anymore. Exactly. So what's the benefit here is keeping blaming everybody else and reacting to everybody else and making stuff up so that I can keep having that experience of being entitled and all of that, or actually being in real control and real presence and real calm and real bliss, because I don't have to be at the mercy of anybody else, what they say or do, because I'm the one who calls the shots for myself, right? So I'm just going to bring in a little extra bit here, because we've been, the way I understand it, talking about mostly emotional triggers or mental triggers, where somebody says something or does something and we feel something. So, and that's a very common thing. Often we'll react in anger or grief or fear or something like that, and try to balance out the situation because we feel like there's some imbalance there or inequality in it somehow. Somebody's trying to control me, somebody's trying to ruin something to me, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm going to share a couple of instances where that's not quite the same, or doesn't seem to be quite the same as what we're describing, if that's okay, just to bring that
Sure.
in. Two instances that were very clear for me. I was sitting in a guitar lesson with my guitar teacher. My guitar teacher was a long, lanky kind of guy, and my dad was a long, lanky kind of guy. And as my guitar teacher was explaining something to me, he just lifted up his hand, his arm, in emphasis of something. And I almost dived under the chair, like threw the guitar that I had away and dived under the chair. But I didn't. I stopped myself, but I realized like my heart was racing. I was absolutely terrified and thought, what in heaven's name just happened? Right. And it was like, boom, that fast. I didn't know what it didn't even, I figured it out after. That's one instance. Another instance was I was in a room with a psychomotor therapist. I think you also call them that in English, psychomotor. It's like a kind of physiotherapy, I think, psychomotor therapy. And she was checking out my trigger responses. Yeah. So she walked, I was in the middle of the room and she stood in the corner and she walked towards me and that was fine. I didn't know what she was doing. We were talking. And then she moved in front of the door and walked towards me. She took like one step and I was on the other side of the room. I don't know how I got there, screamed at the top of my lungs, no! And that was it. So there are the kind of triggers that are what we might want to call emotional triggers. They bring up something emotional that is sort of in a hurt place or provoked place. I would consider these kind of triggers to be quite different. They were visual, right? So it was just a movement of an arm or a body in a certain place in the room in front of the door. There was a reason for that, why that was a kind of a trigger. And then how those kind of triggers can be addressed similarly, but also differently. And they still start with, what did my nervous system think was going to happen or was happening, and what was really happening? And being able to separate those two things in order to be present enough to have it happen and not have that reaction, or catch it before it knocks us over. So I wanted to just bring that into the mixture before we went on.
Yeah. It reminds me, Miriam, of when I was a much younger woman in my early years of marriage. Every time Christy, my husband, would get sick, I'd get so angry. I used to immediately go to anger and couldn't find compassion for him, couldn't go to a place where I could be of practical support and help. I had to actually leave, and I'd leave him there in the bed, sick on his own. And I'd be upset with myself for doing it, but I was angry and I couldn't figure out why. And eventually, through presence and reflection and everything else, I came to realize that it was because my dad died when I was 10. And every time my husband got sick, I thought he was going to die and leave me. And that was where the reaction was coming from. So that was a form of triggering. And I had no idea what was going on. But, the practices that we talk about, were very helpful in that. And, so yes, that happens too. And I know in my work with people, I'm constantly hearing from people, she said that to me and, she shouldn't have said that and that upset me and she should be more considerate and how dare they think that or say that. And I get it. We feel awful and we're looking for the reason. And it's not always obvious. Sometimes it's buried deep in our subconscious and it's not something that's active in our mind. But yet the reaction comes and the feeling comes. Go ahead, Bobby.
I have a question. That was such a beautiful explanation of it. And once you realized that your anger at your husband was really fear-based of losing your father. What happened to that trigger at that point? Did it change? Did it disappear?
Yeah. It didn't disappear immediately. It continued to come when he got sick. But once I understood what it was, I was able to work with it. I was able to allow that discomfort to be there and have some compassion for myself and take care of myself. And once I was able to do that, then I was able to help him and be of some support.
Well, and I think for those that are listening, this is a great place to pause, because that is just a beautiful description of the powerful use of a trigger as a catalyst to go with inside and explore, and to recognize. Same thing with me yelling, sometimes at these customer service people. It was never about what the customer service person was doing. It wasn't about the fact that your husband was getting sick. So these unconscious triggers, subconscious triggers that get fired off in us, it's just a beautiful, like an invitation delivered on a silver platter in a Tiffany box, saying, open this box, let's go within. You're ready now to explore some of the conditioning and perhaps have the opportunity to begin unwinding some of that conditioning. And it's like you, at my center that I go to, yesterday's talk was on what the Buddhists call the fetters, which are like the encumbrances that keep us tied down and keep us locked into the illusion. And it's an opportunity to go inside and explore some of these fetters that are, so much of the perceived limitations that we have in life are the result of worn out meta models and conditioned ideas and limiting beliefs that we've taken in, and just things that we've brought into our idea of ourself, our own perceived self-identity, or our self-esteem on those things. And there's such a beautiful opportunity when we have these triggers, to allow that to be a catalyst, a cause to take a pause and to go within and go, what's really going on here? Because it cannot be that the partner who I love and am committed to has gotten ill, because we all get ill.
It just to piss me off.
Yeah.
I know what he's up to.
Yeah, and it gives you the space to laugh at it later once you've realized.
Of course. Yeah.
That. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I think different triggers arise at different times in our lives. And to what you were saying, Bobby, I think when our biology or our neurology or our nervous system is in a place where it's safe enough to process something, that's when it'll arise. So it is a gift.
Yeah.
Because it comes up when we feel safe enough to process it. But our conditioning is to run away from it. And I suppose our invitation is to embrace it and open up that gift, that Tiffany box, take the ribbons off and see what's inside. Because there's always a gift once you realize what's going on.
I like to see it as fighting my own imagination with my own imagination. It's a trigger is a reminder of something that was, but not necessarily what is. So if I'm reacting to something in my now, it is likely my imagination. So this idea of you're triggering me, you're doing this to me, you shouldn't have said that because you made me angry, or you hurt my feelings, or whatever. You, it's always you, but it's all about me. Instead of, I feel this, So my feeling is trying to tell me something about my interpretation of the situation and what I imagine the situation to be, what I imagine you meant by what you said. And with presence, I can always check. And it doesn't mean the other person will respond in honesty, but I can still check and respect myself. That sounded, for example, it sounded like something like you meant it to be hurtful. Was that your intention? Or were you intending to frighten me? Or were you intending, whatever, I can check, because even then I'm opening for a possibility there might be something else. But I'm still noticing what's going on with me. I'm noticing that that was my interpretation. I take responsibility for that. And then I allow you to elaborate. And that opens up for incredible possibilities for dialogue and change and growth. Like I'm imagining, because I have also had that, well, not that particular thing. Sometimes I have seen someone in a group workshop, a man, go into like weeping and, you know, being on the floor in a big lump and everything, and noticing that I have had like degrading thoughts of the man, like feeling disgusted by him, which is not a natural reaction for me, actually. And then getting very curious as to what in heaven's name is going on. Because as you say, Bobby, it's an invitation. This is not a natural reaction, but it is my reaction. It is a reaction. And what's going on in me? Because the man is obviously in incredible emotional pain. So what am I putting between him and me to create this situation in me? It's an incredible opportunity. And then let the person know, I didn't mean to, it was not my real intention to reject you or ignore you or be mean to you or anything like that. Something was going on in me and I needed to address it, and especially take a step back so as not to hurt you with it, and then go into a discussion, a dialogue with the person. And there can be an incredible love and intimacy that comes out of that, so that I can let go of whatever impression I have that's connected to something before, because that is not this. And I love saying that to myself. That is not this, and this is not that. So now can I look at this and see what's going on here actually? So that's a thing that everybody can practice and better and better at.
Yeah, I know, I love that. And one of the things I often recommend to people, and that is the use of I statements when you're talking to another person. If you think they've triggered you, and you know you're saying, "I'm interpreting what was just said as whatever. Was that your intention?" is far more productive than saying, "You just said that and upset me." Keep the finger down and use I rather than you. It's very helpful.
Yeah, and that if you're going to have that dialogue, doing that and just saying, you know, here's what I'm inferring from what you're saying, is that the message that you hoped I would receive? That just creates enough space that if we do that was wrong of you to say that, and you make me angry, that's naturally going to put that person in a defensive mindset. And even if they didn't intend it, they're going to be going within and going, oh my God, what did I do to trigger this off? And if you phrase it the way that you both did, this is what's going on inside of me. Is that what you intended? Now that creates the space where we can have a
exploration.
And a meaningful conversation and exploration, and it just is so much easier.
Yep. There's often a thing that people don't notice, and it's not an intentional thing. Again, when we're triggered or when we trigger ourselves, we're not the same people. We've gone into some overwhelming nervous system thingy that is fight, flight, freeze, fawn, whatever we're doing. doing, not being, but doing. And then we don't operate from the same place that we would do when we're present, basically. So we make the other person unconsciously, make the other person into some sort of perpetrator. And it's not necessarily intentional. It is our way of reacting to a perceived situation, which is often some sort of perceived attack.
Mm-hmm.
So the more we can understand that there is that element of that is making another person into something or someone like a perpetrator, that can awaken a sense of respect and a drive to not want to do that. And to get more and sort of more of the energy towards getting more real and getting more in touch with what's going on. Because generally speaking, we're not, I mean, I'm generalizing, but we're not really out to hurt other people, generally speaking.
No.
And so there's the opportunity I really don't want to treat other people like that. Like I really in myself deep down do not want to do this. So I'm going to invite myself to become more present and to notice and to be open to the possibility for a dialogue so that I can release this habit, because it's a habit, and then learn a new habit that's more productive, because we can take a disempowering habit and replace it with an empowering habit for ourselves, at least, which may actually spill off onto other people and they make some changes in themselves. I'm just going to quickly mention, someone had a comment about I get triggered when I'm anxious. Now, if you're already anxious, I suppose, or what's the word? I propose, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but I suggest that you are already triggered. If you're anxious, you've already gone into some interpretation of a situation that something is going to hurt or go wrong or is dangerous. So you're already triggered.
I see that a little differently.
Good. Let's hear it.
Certainly there's already something that's going on. If you're anxious, I think as we begin to get into the emotions that we've been conditioned to experience as negative, anxious, frustrated, angry, the list is pretty robust. As we get into those states, then our access to resources shrinks. We're always doing the very best that we can in the moment based on our ability to access our resources in that moment. And if we're anxious, if we're fearful, if we're frustrated, if we're angry, our access to those resources gets smaller and smaller. So I'll go back to my customer service telephone call. On those good calls, I was already in a very peaceful, blissful state. So when the person didn't happen to have the answer, I'm like, oh, well, they're probably new and everybody's got to learn at some time. And, this is, maybe I can help this be a learning experience for them. So I'm in a good, peaceful place. On those calls where I was already frustrated, I was on a deadline, I was angry, and now I got the internal dialogue going on in my head. I've got this idiot on the line and I need the answer now. I don't have time to go through them giving me, and what was the phrase that there was a phrase that they use, I'm so sorry that you're going through that experience. And my commitment is I'm going to do the very best that I can to resolve this on this call. Is that okay with you? And the first time that they do it, fine. But if they're new, that's their like go-to phrase while they're thinking about what they're going to do next. And when my internal state is not in a good place, my tolerance for that is shite.
At best.
And therefore, I am more easily triggered in those moments. And that's why frequent listeners to this podcast have heard me say ad infinitum that our emotions are not telling us about our circumstances. Our
No.
emotions are an internal weather report. And so in a way, I love what our unknown Facebook user commented on, because I think that hits the nail right
Yeah.
on the head. When we are emotionally overwhelmed and we're in that state where we're not at fight or flight, but we're on that path, that's where we're headed. Our patience and our compassion and our resilience and our well-being and our creativity and all of those other resources that are part of the original programming are just not quite as accessible.
No.
And that's why
No.
it's such a beautiful
It's
invitation. The silver platter and the Tiffany box
yeah.
and the beautiful
Yeah.
lace bow. Go within, seeker,
Yeah.
and explore. It's an invitation to
Yeah.
look.
No,
So
I love what both of you are saying, and I really like
they're
that we're
both
talking
true
about.
in certain circumstances. Absolutely.
Absolutely, they are. They are both have merit. But I love the how you're talking about, what the feeling means, because I think what a lot of people fall into is I have to change my thinking. If I'm being triggered, I got to think differently. I got to do something different in my head. And what I have found much more helpful and impactful is to understand that what's going on at a feeling level rather than interrogating the thinking.
Yes.
Because, as you said, it is weather, and how we're feeling is our own internal system giving us an indication of how much attention we should be paying to what we're thinking. So, if the weather is shite, we really shouldn't be paying any attention to it. We should just try and step back and be quiet and let the storm pass, and then see what's in our mind. Because, as you so eloquently said, Bobby, we don't have access to our resources when we're all busied up in our head. And whether it's stress or anxiety or fear or triggered or anything else, when we have emotions we don't like, really that's our system saying, don't be paying attention to this. You got Bob the drunk guy in your head again. Wait till he sobers up. Then maybe tune in. And I think when we work with ourselves at a feeling level rather than at a thinking level, I've just found that really helpful. And even just being with the feeling, just stopping and breathing a little and tuning inwards and saying, where am I feeling this? My throat, my chest, my tummy, my big toe, where is it? And just by being with the feeling, it moves and shifts
Yeah.
and softens, and suddenly that opens up the access to our resources again. And it helps Bob the drunk guy sober up a small bit, and we can start accessing information that's more useful to us. So I love that.
Yeah, and I think there's more and more of a feeling that triggers are bad and offensive and to be avoided. But it's interesting also to think about, for anybody that's listening to this that's ever heard of neuro-linguistic programming or NLP. That's a multi-billion dollar industry, and a major part of that is teaching people how to install anchors. And if you could think of triggers and anchors as kind of that. I'm trying to do a yin yang symbol with
Yeah.
my hands. Can't do it. The an anchor is the yang to yin's trigger. They are same sides of a different coin, and merely realizing that
Yeah.
is all of a sudden just thinking that triggers aren't necessarily bad. They're not inherently bad. They can be seen as either a, a terrible personal offense or a glorious invitation. And that we get to choose that. How we, we are responsible.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that triggers, or at least the reaction to what we can call a trigger, can feel really bad. It can feel bad. That doesn't mean that it is bad. We have that sort of conditioning, oh, pain is bad. Pain is a lot of information that can help us not have so much pain.
Yeah.
So there's this, again, the ability to receive the pain, welcome the pain, receive the information from the pain, whether it's physical or emotional, and transmute it into something else and have it be supportive. Triggers can be, and our emotional responses to them can be very, very helpful and can set us free, or we can set ourselves free when we use the information that is encapsulated in them. It's an invitation, and it can be an incredibly good invitation if we're willing to, or when we're willing to look at them from a different perspective. Yeah. So just to clarify, we're not talking about, when we talk about emotions as being information and not necessarily telling us anything about the truth of our situation, we're talking about situations where we may feel like we're in danger, or may feel like we're being attacked or whatever, or treated badly. We're not talking about the situations where we actually are in physical danger. So if someone is coming at me with a knife and I feel frightened, that could be really good information to get out of there, right? It's not the time to be standing there going, I'm feeling fear right now. I wonder why. What's my body trying to tell me? It's like, in those kinds of situations, it might be a good idea to get out of there and then have a look at what was going on with me anyway. I mean, this is generalizations about both kinds of situations, of course, but generally speaking, we're talking about the emotions that are arising as a response to some sort of trigger, to keep calling it that, and then the information that we can glean from that and transmute into wisdom and presence and bliss eventually.
Yeah. It's interesting about the anchors, Bobby. Another thing, that we've learned from NLP is this thing about the map is not the territory. And we all have a map in our head of how the world works, how people should behave, what they should say and not say. But we go out into the world then, and the territory is not the map we have in our head. And that can often trigger us because things aren't playing out the way we expect them to. Doesn't mean anybody's after us or anything, but it's our interpretation again. Forget now the point I was going to make about that. I'm after losing my train of thought.
Well, and the the whole work, I'm a hypnotist by training and profession, and the whole work that we do is exploring the subconscious mind and what are it's all about the things that we have integrated into our perceived being, and integrated so well that we don't have to think about it. So it's an ingrained habit. And it's the habit that, we're not working for the 21 or 28 or 40 days to install the habit. It's now after the habit has been installed. And like the map is not the territory, or the menu is not the meal.
Yeah.
The exploration of that gives you an opportunity to kind of unpack the story that you're telling yourself about how life should go, and take a look at it and see, are these ideas that I used to have still serving me? Like you did that eventually at some point with your husband getting sick. It's like, what's going on here? And then you go back and you do the exploration and you find out, oh, it's because when I was 10 years old, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And now this totally doesn't make sense
No.
anymore. And now you have the ability to add a new effectiveness layer or rewire the
Yes.
circuitry a
Yeah.
little bit and put it back together more in harmony with the way that life actually works.
Mhm.
And most of our so-called negative frustrations are when our story that we've been telling ourselves of how life should work is not aligned with the way that life is
Is work.
actually unfolding.
Yeah.
And we're wrestling with that. And, you know, that struggle is the source of a lot of suffering, according
Mhm.
to the Buddha.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because I think a lot of people, when they start out on a spiritual journey and they get into quiet time and meditation and that, like, that's wonderful. But when we live in a world, not in a world of meditation. We live in a world of things and people and events. You know, and there was an old saying that, you know, anybody can be a Buddha on the top of the mountain, but when you start climbing down the mountain and meeting other people on the way up, it's a different story.
Yeah.
So, you know, meditations are wonderful, quiet time and reflection, they're all wonderful, but they're to help us when we're out in the world, you
Yeah.
know, to raise our level of awareness and our level of consciousness about how we're showing up and what maps we have, where we need to make some U-turns and go down a different road. Yeah, it's fascinating.
I'm going to bring in a point as well. Thank you. This idea of how we're showing up
Mm.
and the way we think the world should be. There's also an element of, I've spoken about the perpetrator and looking at other people as perpetrators. There is also us looking at ourselves as people who cannot handle it. Right? When I'm
You
getting
kind of
triggered,
what?
people who can't handle it.
Okay. Yeah.
So if I'm being triggered by someone and you're hurting my feelings or whatever, you're treating me badly, and reacting and reacting and reacting, essentially under all of that is I'm weak, I'm helpless, I'm powerless, I'm out of control, I can't deal. There's something about me that is deficient.
Mm.
If I'm looking at life and it seems too big, or I'm running away from discomfort or trying to avoid it, there is likely a simultaneous dialogue going on inside me telling me I can't handle it. It's too
Yeah.
much for me. Now, a lot of people don't look at this particular part of the equation, which will often come from when I was a kid, I was often or felt often powerless, but may
Mhm.
actually have been powerless and dependent on other people for my survival. We're kids. That's kind of how it works. We
Yeah.
need parents or grown-ups or somebody generally to show us the way and make sure we eat and make sure we're clean and all of that stuff. And so we bow under to those who have more power, more authority than we.
Mm.
And somewhere along the line, if we don't make the transition mentally, emotionally, we do it physically anyway, generally speaking, because we grow up into bigger bodies. But if we don't make the mental, emotional transition to being grown up ourselves, and we stay in that sort of state of being children dependent on other authorities, then we will often see ourselves unconsciously as dependent and weak and helpless at the mercy of other people, not being able to handle. And especially if we were children, being faced with challenges that were way bigger than we could handle. We didn't have the resources, we didn't have the experience enough. The reflective ability, and especially our nervous systems, would get really quickly overwhelmed very often. So we didn't have access to what we needed. And if nobody's teaching us that and supporting us into learning that and staying in our
Yeah.
strength and becoming more powerful, we don't easily make that transition and into adulthood. And then we stay in that sort of powerless, weak, helpless identity, to call it that,
Yeah.
improvement of ourselves. So part of this journey going from being triggered to being free and present is learning to see ourselves as the adults and powerful authority figures that we are, with this flow of energy and this presence in the world, and whatever you want to call it, the God in us or whatever, and not child dependent at the mercy of, etc., etc. It's easier and very important to make that transition and understand that our old identity no longer fits, as Bobby was mentioning. This doesn't suit me anymore, and these behaviors and strategies that I learned as a child and interpretations that I made as a child are no longer fitting to this now situation. And allowing myself the time and the support and the presence to learn to be more present and to see myself more clearly and to practice being more of who I now am and becoming at all times, so that I can let those old identities and behaviors and strategies and interpretations and whatever go. And then it's so much easier to just be and let the storms rage. And I'm still here just fine in my power, sovereignty, and strength. I'm fine. And allow other people the opportunity to be with whatever strategies and things they need to learn as well, so that they also can grow and become more present. And it is an incredible gift to ourselves, but also to others. So you may not be the person you think you are. And so those triggers, you may be able to let them go the more you understand who you are now. And why not do that? And if you need any help, get here. Sound you all as you're all listening to us talk about all of this. Let us know, like, what are you understanding, or what are you not understanding, or what does that feel like to you, or sound like to you? We'd love to hear from you. We're talking. We'd love to hear from you.
I'm glad you said that, Miriam, because as you were speaking, what I was thinking was, and it can be so useful to talk this through with somebody else, or to have somebody to process these things with. You know, sometimes when we go into reflection on our own, we can get lost in our own thinking and take ourselves down rabbit holes and end up even more overwhelmed. You know, so sometimes it's good to have somebody with you, you know, a friend, a coach. You know, it doesn't have to be one of us, but it's good to have an ally.
I have a group of hypnotists that I'm very close to, and we will often call one another. And when the person answers the phone and say, I just need a sounding board here real quick. And that is an instruction to the person receiving the call that you don't need to fix this. You don't need to give me any advice. I'm not looking for any of that. I just want to have the opportunity to say something out loud to somebody else. And so I can feel what it sounds like to say it, because oftentimes in that, not always, but oftentimes in that, just in the mere saying of that out loud, we've all said to ourselves, now that I'm saying it out loud, it sounds kind of silly.
Yeah.
And that's the realization of accessing different parts of our brain and our being through expressing it out loud. Journaling works as well. That's why, you know, many people have a very powerful journaling habit, where when you take the time to write something down, it's like, no, this is bullshit. You know, I've gotten caught up in here. It doesn't feel right now that I'm trying to put it into words. So yeah, having that's another beautiful way of self-exploration. And sometimes the person that is the sounding board will let the person go through and say all of their stuff. And if they're still stuck, oftentimes because they're so close to the forest that they're not seeing the trees, but the person that's serving as the sounding board. And it's a beautiful way to listen, because when you're listening to somebody and you're serving as the sounding board, you know, you have no responsibility here. They're not looking for advice. They're not looking. So you can just listen and hear them. And it's really it's an intimate experience and a beautiful, just a beautiful interaction. And then sometimes you're sitting there and saying, I think I see what you're missing. Would you like a little feedback? And I've told this story before, but I did that with a friend of mine, Andrea, who I do this with. And I called up, PO'd about the way that certain things were happening. And as I was saying it, she's like, say a little bit more about that. Say a little bit more. And I said it, and then it was like she pulled out. She just encouraged me enough to continue talking. And then she says to me, you got it now? And she goes, and I said, yes, I've got it. And she knows, she says, you know, you can continue on with that nonsense as long as you'd like, or you can just let it go right now. And I said to her with all the love, and she felt the love when I said it, I said, F you very much. Because in that moment, it felt so finally. I mean, it not when I called. I mean, I was stuck when I called, and I'm like, ah. And finally, wisdom whispered, make a call to Andrea. She might have the answers that you're looking for. And I did that, and she walked me through it. And she was able to see what I was missing because she wasn't involved in the drama of the story that I was telling myself.
Yeah, yeah.
And
But what you spoke about is so often what happens in one-to-one work. If one person is really listening and with the other person, generally by the time they stop talking, they see what's going on for themselves. Their own bullshit barometer starts going off inside in their head, and they see what's happening. It's one of the beautiful consequences of deep listening.
Yeah.
Is how people just seem to unravel things from themselves when they're in that connected space with you. Beautiful, yeah.
I'm going to actually bring up a thing. I'm going to be really popular now.
Go on. Don't trigger us now.
Be prepared, everyone. Here it comes. Where the other person is receiving the information, not being able, and this is how they trigger themselves, not realizing that they're triggering themselves, not being able to receive the information without countering with an attempt to fix the problem and not realizing that they're triggered on some level and responding to their own discomfort. Now, I have a wonderful partner who I call the Viking. He is absolutely beautiful. And he is so good at fixing all of my problems with the best of intentions. And the lovely thing about that is I know there's a good intention there.
Yeah.
But we do tend to laugh at how often he does not notice that he's switched into he's been triggered by, he doesn't want me to be in any kind of pain. So he's trying to fix. And the conversation around, I actually don't need you to fix it because I'm strong enough to get there. I do need you to listen. And I may ask you, what does this sound like to you? Or do you have any suggestions? Or you're welcome to ask me, would you like to hear my perspective? But that sort of knee-jerk reaction without realizing that it's actually a reaction. Knee-jerk reaction to fix someone else's problem can be a signal. Yes, it may come from a caring place, can be interpreted, or a signal that the other person is weak and needs you to help them. And you may find that you are actually attempting to be a hero and putting yourself on a pedestal above the person. So it's like many opportunities to get into these layers of what's going on with each person in that kind of situation. One of the ways we work, and I'm just going to mention this really quickly, in psychodrama, it can be very valuable. We reverse roles. So whatever I'm saying to the other person, we reverse roles and the other person reflects what I said back on me so that I hear it from outside myself. And then it can hit me. Oh, well, that sounds like suddenly I've solved the whole problem. I see what I didn't see when it was inside me. So that's another way to do it, where it takes you outside of that fixing
Yeah.
Can be very therapeutic, very and clarifying to hear it back.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. This fixing tendency too can be part of somebody being on a victim triangle or the drama triangle. I mean, a carer is one of those, the ways that that presents. You know, I got to fix everything about everybody, or else I'm not okay. And it's quite common.
Mm,
And I think it's part of our cultural conditioning that we're there to help each other. And yes, we are there to help and support each other, but we don't have to fix everything.
mm.
We don't have to have the answer for every situation that arises.
Yes,
We can
because the
let people
question
figure it
actually,
out.
sorry, the question actually arises, what kind of help do you need? Any help? And if you do, what kind of help do you need? Rather than me just jumping in and offering, and not even offering, just giving it
Giving it, yeah.
unsolicited or whatever. Again, presence practice allows us to be with unsolicited advice, for example, where we don't have to react and feel triggered or trigger ourselves by that
Yeah.
either, just because the other person is coming from that space and whatever their need is. So again, it's all opportunity, isn't it? Like it's all
Yes.
blessed
Yes.
opportunities to just
Yeah.
expand and grow and come from heart and see each other and recognize the humanness and the humanity in each other and in ourselves. It's just so beautiful, I think.
Mhm.
It really is.
It comes back to the question, and we all say, "Why is this happening to me?" You know, and the question really is, "Why is this happening for me?"
Yeah.
You know, because everything is an opportunity if we take the perspective that it's an opportunity. You know, what's in this Tiffany box today? It mightn't look like a Tiffany
Mm.
box, you know, might look like a rubbish, but there's something in there if we can just bring ourselves to see it as that. And that's the value of presence. If, you know, when we are present, we're more likely to see it as an opportunity or to be with it rather than be triggered.
Mm. Mm. And sometimes in the greatest pain, there are the
Yeah,
greatest gifts. And
yeah.
I'm not always happy about that.
No.
No.
And I have people in my life that I get triggered by that want to fix everything. And it's an ongoing practice of presence, you know, to be with that. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of mine. I don't like people telling me what the solutions are to my problems. I can figure it out myself. Thank you very much. Don't you disempower me.
You're crossing my boundaries. I mean,
Yeah.
for those of you who are listening, it's from the heart, the fun. It's not a judgment.
No.
We're all human. We all do it. We've all been there. And some of us do it less, and some of us still do it more. It's not a judgment. It's just an appreciation and giving space to being human.
Yeah.
So just to make that clear. So for those of you who might have felt triggered by that, it's not
Just another weather pattern.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. We are coming to the end of our hour. So I invite you to share anything that you've got going in case people are interested, and even if they're not. So who wants to start? Anything you'd like to let people know that you've got on?
I'll start. And I'm Bobby Cobb, as I guess you know by now. Uh, there's a anchored, unconditioned habit. Introduce yourself. Stand and speak proudly. I do have an exciting project that I'm rolling out. It probably is about 2 weeks out, plus or minus a few days, of an interactive experience. It's a series of lessons and guided hypnotic journeys to give you the experience that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. That's something that I think a lot of people, if they're hearing that for the first time, it's kind of like, ooh, I like that. Say that again. Could you repeat that? And many people have heard the longer version of that phrase, and they intellectually understand it, but people very rarely live it as though it's the truth. And I think that's because, the longest distance is the 14 inches from our head to our heart. And being able to intellectually understand something versus really integrating it into our being can be a difficult process. And I've created a series of guided, most of them are like 45 minutes to an hour, hypnotic experiences with some setup and with some exercise afterwards. And if that sounds like it's going to be free when I release it. So if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, you can either DM me on Facebook or shoot me an email at the information either on the screen or in the podcast below, and just tell me that you're interested in the flip book. I'll have a better name for it at some point, but that's the way that I'm thinking about it soon. And I have a group on Facebook where I've been releasing some of this stuff into it called Our Mindful Life. So you can go there and you'll also get notifications of as it gets closer, a couple of weeks out still.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bobby. Jen, you got something going on?
I don't have anything new to speak about today. I'm developing a new program as we speak, but it probably won't be ready until after Easter, I would say. But I know you have things going on, Miriam, so why don't you share?
Ooh, okay.
You know you want to.
I catch you.
Well, I'm a bit, let's go into my fear. I actually have two things going on. Thanks very much for asking. I am offering a 12-week deep dive where we dig into your core issues and work pretty much almost on a daily basis for the 12 weeks. We go into your core issues. We develop and design strategies to get you away from doing those. And it kind of like what we've been talking about here, what's triggering you and how not to keep reacting to those, and how you can design the path to get to where you want to be in your life and create more of what you want in your life. So that is a 12-week deep dive, and I'm actually offering it at a substantially reduced price because I've put together a container in a way as we work together that I haven't tried before. So that's the one thing, and I'm calling it the power model. So if you're interested in knowing more about that, please let me know. You can use this email address or just let me know on Facebook about if you have a question about the power model. The second thing I'm doing is having come out of the closet as a psychic medium and healer, and having done hypnotherapy sessions, I noticed that as I was doing hypnotherapy sessions with people, a lot of times psychic information and mediumship information was coming forward and healing energies where it was possible to combine both of those modalities. So I am now looking for people who would like to be practice sitters for me at also a substantially reduced rate, where I combine the psychic mediumship, reading and healing with hypnotherapy. So if that sounds interesting to you, again, let me know and I will get in touch with you and give you more information. So that's what's going on for me. And also I have a group on Facebook called Center for Mastery and Excellence. Center for Mastery and Excellence. Welcome to join. It is also free and you will find me there. So, and oh dear, Jan, we're all in, well, not all of us. Bobby, you didn't have coughing fits, just Jan and me having coughing fits during this particular.
Apologies.
We're getting triggered. No, I'm kidding. Or maybe, you never know. Thank you all for participating in today's roundtable talk about presence and getting triggered. We hope that you have gleaned some valuable information, and we thank you for your comments and questions. Again, you are welcome to continue afterwards by writing questions and comments to us in our Facebook group, the Presence Posse. And if you're watching the replay, you're also welcome to comment and ask questions, and we will follow up with you in the Presence Posse group. And thank you, Bobby and Jan, and me for the talk today. We will be back next Monday at the same time with a new topic about all things presence. See you next week. And until then, enjoy your week in whatever form you are.
It
Thanks,
unfolds.
everyone.
Be present with your triggers.